Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into a figure from early 20th century Russia whose story, well, it sounds less like history and more like the most outlandish spy novel you've ever read, but it's all too real. We're talking about Yevno Azef.
Yeah, the name might not be instantly familiar to you, but trust us, by the end of this deep dive, it'll definitely stick with you. Our sources for today, they're a fascinating mix, really. We've got detailed analysis from YouTube transcripts by experts who've clearly spent some serious time digging through archives, and also key factual summaries from historical Wikipedia entries. And they paint a picture of a figure so contradictory, he almost, well, defies belief.
They really do. They describe him using terms like double agent, agent provocateur, a revolutionary, and a police spy. One expert we drew from didn't pull any punches, saying Azef expanded the boundaries of understanding human baseness and human betrayal. Pretty strong words.
That phrase, expanded the boundaries, yeah, it really captures the essence of his impact, doesn't it? And the backdrop for this incredible drama is early 20th century Russia, a powder keg era defined by intense revolutionary activity, secret underground movements, political assassinations just rocking the foundations of the state.
Right.
And a Tsarist secret police, the Okhrana, getting increasingly desperate to contain this rising tide of unrest. It's a world just steeped in intrigue, danger, and pervasive surveillance.
And the central mystery, the real mind-bending paradox at the heart of Oedipus' life, is exactly how one man could possibly achieve positions of such power and trust in two, diametrically opposed worlds. How did he rise to become the actual head, the undisputed leader of the SR combat organization, the most feared terrorist branch of the Socialist Revolutionary Party, while simultaneously serving as one of the most valuable, highest-paid agents for the Okhrana, the police force whose sole mission was to destroy that very organization? He was, by all accounts from the sources, a leader of terror and a top police informant, playing both sides with deadly skill for years.
It just seems impossible, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the sources, they actually detail how he navigated this tightrope. Our mission in this deep dive is to guide you through this extraordinary, contradictory life. We'll explore the shocking twists and turns of his career, delve into his methods, of manipulation and deception, understand how he managed to maintain this incredible balancing act for so long,
Right.
trace the steps that led to his eventual exposure, and finally, sort of grapple with what his life story tells us about the nature of espionage, loyalty, self-interest, and, well, the human capacity for deceit in a time of revolution.
Get ready, because there are definitely some aha moments, or perhaps more like oh no moments waiting in his story. So where does this unbelievable tale even begin for Yevno Azef? What set him on this path?
Well, his story starts pretty far from the world of political intrigue. Yevno Azef was born in 1869 in a place called Liskova, which is now part of Belarus. He was the second of 7 children in the family of a poor Jewish tailor.
7 kids, wow.
Yeah, and his family, like many at the time, really struggled financially. When Yevno was about 5, his father moved them to Rostov-on-Don, hoping to improve their situation by opening a drapery shop, but the sources indicate he barely earned enough to even put his children through school, just scraping by.
So right from his childhood, financial hardship was just a constant reality. How did this background connect him to the revolutionary circles and eventually the police?
That financial pressure, well, it appears to have been a really significant early influence, maybe even the defining one. After leaving school around 1890, Azef bounced between various odd jobs. He worked for a time as an assistant to a grain merchant. Then in 1892, things took a turn. He came under suspicion of distributing revolutionary literature.
Which was a big deal back then.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just a minor offense under the Tsarist regime. It could lead to serious consequences.
Right.
So to escape the potential arrest and the difficult circumstances he was in, he made a drastic and, well, pretty telling move. He committed embezzlement. He stole 800 rubles from the merchant he was working for.
800 rubles, that sounds like a substantial sum for the time, enough to make a real escape possible. And he stole money to evade the police who suspected him of revolutionary activity. The contradictions are just baked into his story from the very beginning, aren't they?
Exactly. It's a really telling detail that the path he took to escape revolutionary suspicion was through financial crime, and he used that embezzled money to flee Russia. He went to Germany, where he enrolled in university to study electrical engineering, first in Karlsruhe and later in Darmstadt. It was while he was studying abroad that he began to associate with Russian social democrats, revolutionaries who had also emigrated, often to continue their political activities or studies in, safer environments. He even founded a social democratic circle himself among these students. This is where he started building those connections within the revolutionary emigre community.
And this association abroad is where the truly critical turning point occurs, his first contact with the Tsarist secret police, the Okhrana. Now, this wasn't the police approaching him, was it?
No, and this detail is absolutely crucial to understanding Azef's nature, according to the sources. In April 1893, while still a student in Germany, Azef initiated contact with the Russian secret police. He wasn't caught and then turned. He proactively wrote to the Department of Police, offering to inform on his fellow students in exchange for money.
Wow. He offered to be a spy, just like that.
Just like that. The sources are quite explicit about his motivation here, using the Polish word "cievoszyć," which translates directly to greed, pure and simple.
He offered to be a spy approaching the police, driven purely by greed. That is a stark and powerful beginning to his double life. How did the police respond to this unsolicited offer?
Well, he wrote to the Department of Police in St. Petersburg and also sent a letter to the Okhrana branch in Rostov, maybe hedging his bets a bit. He quickly received a reply from the Department of Police, who asked for more detailed personal information and confirmed they were willing to pay for his services. Azef, already showing a knack for negotiation, immediately demanded a salary of 50 rubles a month to start.
50 rubles a month just for informing on students. Considering his background of financial struggle and the, 800 rubles he embezzled, 50 rubles a month in steady income must have seemed like a significant sum.
Yeah.
A level of financial security he hadn't known, right?
Oh, absolutely. It certainly represented a substantial improvement in his financial situation. And the police, in turn, they quickly assessed his potential value. One source quotes their internal assessment. Yevno Azef is not a stupid man. He is well-informed, has wide connections among Jewish youth living abroad. Hence, he can provide significant benefit. What they saw as his primary zealoty, or advantages, were his connections within the revolutionary circles, particularly among Jewish students, and tellingly, his perceived greed. The assessment concludes, it is to be expected that out of greed, and given his diet, which likely means his financial needs or desire for money, he will highly value his duties.
Wow. They didn't see his greed as a potential problem, but rather as a motivator that would make him a diligent and reliable agent for them. That's a cold, calculating assessment, but I guess logical in the context of espionage.
It is. They believed his financial dependency and desire for money would ensure his loyalty to the Okhrana. And so, based on this assessment, on June 10, 1893, Azef received his first salary payment and was formally assigned his police pseudonym, Vinogradov. This marks his official entry into the world of police espionage, a path he initiated himself, driven, it seems, primarily by financial motives.
Right.
This early decision, rooted in greed and self-preservation, it really seems to foreshadow his entire career operating between these two dangerous worlds.
That thread of financial gain, starting with embezzlement and leading straight to his initial offer to spy, it just runs so strong from the beginning. So he's getting paid by the police, he finishes his engineering degree, presumably, and he's built these connections in revolutionary circles abroad. What happens when he returns to Russia in 1899?
Well, he returns with a kind of dual identity already established.
Yeah.
He has credentials and recommendations from revolutionaries abroad, which allows him entry into the movement inside Russia. But he also has recommendations from the Department of Police to the Moscow Okhrana. And there, he quickly established a close working relationship with the head of the Moscow Okhrana, a guy named S.V. Zubitov. Zubitov was considered a key figure, maybe somewhat ahead of his time in police methods, particularly in using sophisticated secret agents to counteract revolutionary activity from within.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, the sources suggest Zubitov actually trained Azef in these advanced police methods, teaching him how to operate effectively and avoid detection while deeply embedded in the revolutionary underground.
So the police weren't just receiving information, they were actively investing in Azef, training him to be a more effective spy within the very movement they wanted to infiltrate and destroy. That level of strategic investment is pretty significant.
It really is. And Azef was apparently a quick study. He joined one of the prominent revolutionary groups of the time, the Northern Union of Socialist Revolutionaries, which was led by Andrei Argonov. Azef quickly made himself indispensable, becoming, in effect, Argonov's right-hand man.
His right-hand man, how did he manage that so quickly?
Well, sources note that Argonov deeply valued Azef's practical skills and his apparent dedication. They cite examples like Azef's ability to set up an underground printing operation, which was a crucial function, right, for distributing revolutionary propaganda. What Argonov didn't realize, of course, was that Azef was likely receiving assistance and perhaps even technical expertise from the Okhrana to pull off these seemingly difficult tasks.
So his apparent success and dedication as a revolutionary were partly facilitated by his police employers. That is just another layer of deception. It built his credibility within the SRs while also serving the Okhrana's goal of having a deeply embedded agent.
Precisely. And Zubitov used the information Azef provided for mass arrests of revolutionaries. But the crucial point, which was part of Zubitov's strategy according to the sources, was that Azef himself was careful not to get caught during these roundups.
Ah, convenient.
Very. The sources explicitly state that Zubitov carried out mass arrests, his agent wasn't caught, and thanks to this he moved higher up the revolutionary hierarchy in a way planned by Zubitov. The police weren't just using Azef for intel. They were actively using him to strategically position him for higher influence within the revolutionary structure.
They were grooming him for leadership in the very organizations they wanted to destroy. That's an astonishing long-term play. It really is.
It certainly required patience and careful handling. This process continued when Azef went abroad again in November 1901. His stated purpose was to help unify the various scattered SR groups across Europe into a single cohesive party.
Okay.
But the sources highlight a deeply disturbing detail here. Argonov, his mentor, the man who trusted him implicitly, was arrested as soon as Azef left Russia. Yes. Before his departure, Azef had obtained detailed information from Argonov about the Northern Union's structure, key personnel, addresses, even operational passwords. He convinced Argonov he needed this information to manage affairs from abroad. It seems pretty clear from the sources that Azef handed this intelligence directly to the Okhrana just before or immediately after leaving Russia, leading directly to Argonov's arrest.
He betrayed the man who had taken him in and made him his closest confidant. That's just chilling. A chilling demonstration of his lack of loyalty to anyone in the revolutionary movement.
It really underscores the transactional nature of his relationships within the SRs, and having essentially eliminated his mentor, Azef continued his rise. In 1902, he was a founding member of the Unified Socialist Revolutionary Party formed in Switzerland. With his established reputation and Argonov conveniently out of the way, he became deputy head of the party's terrorist arm, the SR Combat Organization.
Right, the Combat Organization. This was the group specifically tasked with carrying out acts of political terror, including assassinations of high-ranking officials.
Yes, exactly. This is the group that would become notorious for some of the most significant terrorist acts against the Tsarist regime. The first leader of the combat organization was Grigory Gershuni, a very charismatic and dedicated revolutionary.
Oh.
Gershuni, like Argonov before him, evidently trusted Azef completely. The sources note that Gershuni actually nominated Azef as his successor, and when Gershuni was arrested in the spring of 1903, betrayed, by the way, by another double agent, which just illustrates how pervasive Okhrana infiltration was.
Wow, it was everywhere.
It really was. When Gershuni was arrested, Azef stepped right into the leadership role. He became the head of the SR Combat Organization, with the well-known revolutionary figure Boris Savinkov as his deputy.
So by 1903, Yevno Azef, the tailor's son who started by embezzling money and offering to spy for cash, has reached the absolute pinnacle of both worlds. He is now the head of Russia's deadliest terrorist group and one of the most valuable, highest-paid agents reporting to the police trying to stop that very group. That position of simultaneous power and betrayal is truly, truly astonishing.
It's a position almost unparalleled in the history of espionage. By 1904, Azef was firmly entrenched right at the peak of this elaborate deception. He was simultaneously leading the most dangerous revolutionary organization and acting as a prized asset for the police, and his salary from the Okhrana reflected this extraordinary value. It increased significantly over this period, rising to 500 rubles a month after Pyotr Rachkovsky took over his handling, and eventually reaching 1,000 rubles a month under police directors like Gerasimov and the powerful Interior Minister Stolypin.
1,000 rubles a month, just from the police alone. That was an absolute fortune at the time. And on top of that, as you said, he controlled the considerable funds of the combat organization. He was clearly in this for significant financial gain.
Financial gain appears to be a constant driving motivation for him, yes. But while earning his huge salary from the Okhrana, he wasn't just preventing attacks or, reporting on planned ones. The sources state that he was actively organizing many of them himself.
Wait, hang on. He was organizing them himself?
Yes. One source notes explicitly that he himself devised and organized terrorist actions, even participated in them. This was a crucial part of his strategy, and bizarrely, maybe the Okrana strategy, too, in a way.
Wait, the police allowed their top agent to organize terrorist attacks, including deadly ones. Why on earth would they do that? That seems counterintuitive.
Well, it's the deep paradox of his deep cover operation, isn't it?
Mhm.
By allowing Azef to lead and organize successful attacks, like the assassination of the Interior Minister Vyacheslav von Plehve in 1904.
Pulev, the interior minister. The guy who was technically Azef's boss, right? Since he ran the police.
Exactly. Plehve was Azef's nominal employer, the one who ultimately authorized Azef's infiltration in the first place. And adding another layer of irony, Plehve had prioritized Gershuni's arrest, which inadvertently cleared the path for Azef to take leadership. The assassination was a huge blow to the regime, a massive victory for the revolutionaries. And sources note Azef even cheekily informed his handler, Ratayev, about the planned assassination, apparently changing the minister's name in the report, and then requested a pay raise afterwards.
Unbelievable. And he also organized the assassination of Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich in 1905, the Tsar's uncle.
He did, another major success for the combat organization under Azef's leadership. Sources describe the Grand Duke as a controversial figure, a fervent conservative, fervent anti-Semite. His assassination was quite impactful.
So by allowing these high-profile attacks, the Okrana was essentially, what? Building Azef's revolutionary credentials.
Precisely. It solidified his position at the top,
Yeah.
making him indispensable to the revolutionaries. And from that vantage point, with that incredible level of trust, he could identify and betray many other members of the party to the Okrana. Sources note he informed on at least 17 subordinates in 1905 alone, including long-standing veterans and other key figures.
So the police were making this brutal strategic trade-off, sacrificing some officials, maybe even high-level ones, or allowing major attacks to happen in exchange for maintaining their top agent's cover and using him to root out dozens of other revolutionaries. That's a really harsh calculus.
It is a brutal calculus indeed.
But how did Azef balance it? Giving the police enough information to keep them happy and paying him without exposing himself or completely dismantling the combat organization he was leading, that sounds like walking on a razor's edge.
It was the true art of his deception. He was incredibly tactical in who he betrayed and what information he shared. He had to provide enough actionable intelligence to justify his high salary and prove his value to the Okrana, right?
Right.
But he couldn't give them so much that the SRs would realize they had a mole at the very top, or that the combat organization became completely ineffective, which ironically would diminish his own importance to both sides.
So what was his method?
The sources suggest he tended to betray members he viewed as, quote, less needed or less disciplined. Crucially, he seems to have deliberately protected the disciplined experts in terrorist work, the ones really skilled with bombs and revolvers.
Ah, the effective ones.
Exactly. These were the people who made the combat organization effective, capable of carrying out the very acts that built Azef's reputation as this daring leader within the SRs. He sacrificed the, let's say, the expendable ones to protect the truly useful assets. Useful for his own purposes, of course.
He was basically curating the organization he was supposed to be helping destroy, ensuring it remained just effective enough to boost his own standing. That's incredibly manipulative. And he wasn't just manipulating revolutionaries. You mentioned he was also playing games with his police handlers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Azef was a master at managing his relationship with the Okrana. His initial handler, Leonid Ratayev, was eventually replaced by Pyotr Ratkovsky, a powerful figure within the police establishment. Now, what's significant, according to the sources, is that Ratkovsky was deeply disliked by his rival, the former director of police, Alexei Lopukhin.
Okay, internal police politics.
Right. And this animosity between factions within the Okrana created, as one source put it, a kind of alliance between imagined Azef and offended Ratayev against those who broke promises, meaning against the Department of Police in St. Petersburg, who had, from Ratayev's perspective, mishandled things. This internal police rivalry was a seam Azef could exploit brilliantly.
How?
Well, Ratayev, and later his successor, Gerasimov, didn't always report every single detail Azef gave him up the chain to the main Department of Police. And the department didn't always pass everything on to the local Okrana branches responsible for surveillance. This fragmentation and lack of complete information flow within the police apparatus worked directly to Azef's advantage. It created blind spots he could operate in, little pockets of information he could control.
So he wasn't just a double agent between revolutionaries and police. He was leveraging internal police politics to create even more space for himself. He was truly playing a multidimensional game. And this involved not just protecting himself from the Okrana, but also eliminating potential threats to his position within the revolutionary movement, specifically other suspected informants, right?
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
The sources point to his direct involvement in ensuring the death of others suspected of being police agents. Most famously, he reportedly ordered the death of Father Capon.
Upon the priest from Bloody Sunday.
The very same. A fascinating and controversial figure. Led the peaceful demonstration in 1905, became a revolutionary hero, only later to be exposed as a police informant himself. When Azef learned of Capon's Okhrana ties, he reportedly ordered his assassination. One source quotes his chilling directive. Azef ordered that Gapon should be killed like a snake.
Chilling is right.
He also approved the killing of another suspected provocateur within the SRs, named Tatarov, who was killed in Warsaw in 1906. The sources mentioned Tatarov earned over 16,000 rubles in about 8 months, as an informant highlighting the immense financial incentives involved here.
16,000 rubles.
Yeah. By giving the green light for these killings, Azef eliminated potential rivals who might expose the existence of top-level moles. Like himself, it was ruthless self-preservation.
Self-preservation, both physically and financially, seems to be his ultimate guiding principle here. Speaking of finances, we've touched on his police salary, but you mentioned he also controlled revolutionary funds.
He did. As the head of the combat organization, he had access to and control over large sums of money donated to the revolutionary cause, thousands and thousands of rubles. And critically, according to the sources, he was not required to provide detailed accounting for these funds.
Oh, convenient again.
Very. This gave him ample opportunity for personal enrichment. Sources indicate he saved for a rainy day, suggesting he siphoned off these revolutionary funds. Later accounts suggest he flat-out embezzled revolutionary funds and invested them, possibly on the stock market. This accumulation of wealth from both the police and the revolutionaries really reinforces the idea that financial gain was perhaps the central, overriding motivation for his actions, potentially far more important to him than any political ideology he might have outwardly professed.
So he was robbing the very cause he was supposedly fighting for, using the money he stole from revolutionaries to fund his comfortable double life and, presumably, his future plans. That adds an extra layer of just cynical opportunism.
What about the combat organization's activities in the later years of his leadership? Did the police strategy toward him change at all?
Yes, it seems it did. After 1906, under Interior Minister Stolypin and Police Director Gerasimov, the Okhrana's approach toward the combat organization shifted somewhat. Instead of just trying to prevent every attack or using Azef to selectively allow some, they instructed him to keep the organization busy with planning, but ensure their actions ultimately failed.
Failed. Why?
The instruction, as one source puts it, was about the militants working at full capacity but nothing coming of it. The idea was to demoralize the revolutionaries, make them believe that terror was impossible due to police effectiveness, and hopefully lead them to abandon the tactic altogether. A strategy of orchestrated failure, essentially.
A strategy of orchestrated failure, and Azef went along with this. He did. It suited him, didn't it? He continued to receive his substantial salary from the Okhrana for keeping the combat organization active, yet ineffective. This allowed him to continue betraying individuals while maintaining his cover and control. However, this policy of deliberate failures eventually had its intended effect on the revolutionary side. The SRs did begin to question the efficacy of terror and eventually decided to suspend terror activities around 1908.
So his actions, following police orders, contributed to the decline of the very organization that made him valuable.
Exactly. It ironically diminished Azef's value to the Okhrana as his primary asset. The combat organization, as a vehicle for infiltration and controlled failure, was winding down its operations.
A fascinating outcome of his own actions and the police strategy. Did this incredibly complex and dangerous double life bleed into his personal life at all? Did he have a family?
He certainly did. The sources describe Azef's double life extending even to his family. He was married to Juba Mankin, who is described as a revolutionary idealist. They had a child. To his wife and his comrades, he maintained the facade of a dedicated revolutionary hero and, a devoted family man. But at the same time, with the substantial funds he was accumulating from both sides, he reportedly spent lavishly on affairs with other women. One notable figure mentioned is a German opera singer or cabaret artist referred to only as Irene, whom he apparently met in Rome.
And how did he explain that to his revolutionary wife and comrades?
He even managed to weave these extramarital relationships into his web of deceit. He reportedly excused them to his revolutionary comrades by claiming they were necessary for intelligence work, for making contacts or gathering information.
Unbelievable. He twisted everything, even his personal relationships and affairs, into justification for his clandestine activities. He was truly living a life built entirely on lies. But despite his incredible skill and the elaborate nature of his deception, cracks eventually started to appear, didn't they? How did someone who had woven such a complex web, manipulating both sides at the highest levels for so long, finally get caught?
Yeah, it's a testament to the difficulty of maintaining such a high wire act indefinitely. Despite his mastery of deception, the sheer scale and, frankly, contradictory nature of his activities eventually raised red flags. The SR Combat Organization's strange mix of spectacular successes like those big assassinations and frustrating failures under his leadership started to make some within the party suspicious.
Even though they trusted him.
Well, their trust in Azef himself was immense, almost unshakable for a long time. But they knew the police had informants, provocateurs, and the pattern of arrests and failures, especially after the shift to orchestrated failure, was just too inconsistent, too puzzling to ignore forever. Something felt wrong.
And this is where Vladimir Burtsev, the man known as the Sherlock Holmes of the Revolution, enters the picture, right?
Yes, Burtsev was a fascinating figure. A left-wing journalist and publisher who had basically dedicated his life to uncovering and exposing police agents or provocateurs operating within the revolutionary movement. He viewed these moles as a fundamental threat, capable of destroying the cause from within. Burtsev, with his really keen investigative mind, began to look into the puzzling circumstances surrounding some of the SR operations and the constant, suspicious stream of arrests.
So he was actively hunting for someone just like Azef. How did he specifically get on Azef's trail? Was there a specific tip-off?
There was. A critical piece of the puzzle came to Burtsev from a whistleblower from inside Tsarist police itself. Burtsev was contacted by a disgruntled Okhrana official named Mikhail Kovalsky, who also used the pseudonym Mestiev.
A police whistleblower? Why did he do it?
This official was a document clerk within the police who had become deeply disillusioned and turned against the government. The sources state that what he saw during his police service evoked such hatred of the government, specifically mentioning his witnessing of the police's involvement in organizing or facilitating pogroms, these horrific violent attacks on Jewish communities that occurred in various cities like Kishinev, Kiev, Zhytomyr, Homel, Bialystok, and Sedlitz during this turbulent period. Mestiev provided Burtsev with a significant amount of accurate information about police operations and agents, including a partial list of informants.
Okay, so he had proof of police misdeeds and some name.
Right. However, critically, Mestiev did not know the name of the highly placed spy operating at the very top of the SR leadership. He knew there was one, a major one, but not who.
So Burtsev knew there was a huge mole thanks to the whistleblower, but didn't know who it was. How did he possibly narrow it down to Azef, the leader himself?
Well, Burtsev, armed with this crucial insight that a high-level mole existed, began observing key figures much more closely. His suspicion eventually fell on Azef through a seemingly minor, yet highly significant, detail. Burtsev reportedly spotted Azef openly riding through St. Petersburg in an open carriage at a time when other revolutionaries were living in deep hiding, constantly changing locations to avoid police surveillance.
Ah, that doesn't sound right for a wanted man.
Exactly. This public visibility and apparent lack of fear struck Burtsev as highly unusual, almost impossible, for someone supposedly leading the most wanted terrorist organization in Russia. It was the kind of detail that only really made sense if Azef wasn't truly evading the police at all.
That's an incredible piece of observational deduction, just like Sherlock Holmes, as they called him. But a suspicious public appearance, I mean, that's not concrete proof, is it? How did Burtsev get the confirmation he needed? Proof strong enough to convince the SR leadership who trusted Azef so completely.
Yet Burtsev understood the immense difficulty. Convincing the SR Central Committee that their trusted leader, their hero, was a traitor based solely on his own suspicions and a whistleblower's anonymous information about a high-level mole that was never going to fly. He needed concrete, undeniable confirmation.
So what did he do?
So he engineered a meeting with a man who was absolutely in a position to know the truth. Alexei Lopukhin, the former director of police.
Lopukhin, the one who disliked Rachkovsky as Azef's handler.
The very same. As we mentioned earlier, Lopukhin had been replaced by Rachkovsky, and sources indicate there was significant animosity and rivalry between them. Burtsev somehow managed to arrange a meeting with Lopukhin in a seemingly innocuous location, a train carriage traveling from Cologne to Berlin.
A clandestine meeting on a train to reveal a top spy. It really does sound like the climax of a thriller novel. What happened in that carriage?
Well, in that private compartment, Burtsev laid out his case. He presented his evidence, his suspicions about Azef, the whistleblower's info, the carriage sighting, everything, directly to Lopukin. And in that moment, Lopukin confirmed it. He confirmed that Yevno Azef was, indeed, a long-standing and highly valued agent of the Okhrana.
Wow. Just confirmed it.
Just confirmed it. The source emphasizes the significance of this moment, stating, that was enough. It was a moment they didn't notice that would change history. Lopukin's confirmation, coming from someone who had been the director of police, was the undeniable proof Burtsev needed.
That confirmation from someone who had been at the very top of the police force, that was an absolute bombshell. What did Burtsev do then? He must have gone straight to the SRs.
He did. Armed with Lopukin's confirmation, Burtsev presented his findings to the SR Central Committee. Understandably, their initial reaction to the accusation against their trusted leader Azef was described as absurd. Their faith in him was immense, almost cult-like in some way.
I can imagine.
However, the evidence was mounting. The whistleblower's information about a high-level mole, Burtsev's persistent investigation, and now this confirmation from a former police director. It was too compelling to just ignore completely. They agreed to conduct an inquiry. As an initial step, they investigated the case of Tatarov, that other suspected informant mentioned by the whistleblower. This investigation quickly confirmed Tatarov's betrayal and his subsequent execution, which lent significant weight to the possibility that other high-level moles existed.
Right, proving the whistleblower was credible.
Exactly. Following this, they formed a special commission of highly respected, long-standing revolutionary figures like Vera Figner and German Lopatin to conduct a full, in-depth inquiry specifically into Azef himself.
And Azef, what was he doing while this commission was investigating him?
Azef, learning that Burtsev had obtained confirmation from Lopukin, started to get desperate. He secretly traveled back to St. Petersburg to pressure Lopukin, likely trying to bully or persuade him to retract his statement.
Did it work?
No. Lopukin refused to back down. In fact, he went further. He contacted Andrei Argonov, Azef's former mentor who was now out of prison, to verify Burtsev's claims independently. And critically, Lopukin then traveled all the way to London to personally repeat his testimony directly to 3 representatives of the SR party who were part of the official investigation commission.
Lopukin risked significant repercussions from the Tsarist government for revealing state secrets like that, but he stood by his confirmation and made sure the SRs heard it directly from him. That took some courage.
It really did. It was a key act of, well, courage or principle on his part, contrasting sharply with Azef's behavior. With Lopukin's direct testimony confirming Burtsev's evidence beyond any reasonable doubt, the SR Central Committee was finally, irrevocably convinced. On January 5, 1909, they formally unmasked Yevno Azef as a police spy and provocateur.
And for someone in his position leading the combat organization.
Exact. Such a revelation typically carried an immediate death sentence within that organization, and they absolutely planned to assassinate him.
His own organization, the one he led and betrayed for years, was now hunting him. Did they manage to get him?
No. Azef was warned, presumably by his police contacts, maybe Gerasimov, that his cover was completely blown and his life was in imminent danger. He fled the very next night, January 6, 1909. And in a final, almost darkly comedic twist, the sources note he used good passports obtained from Gerasimov, his police handler.
Of course he did.
He traveled under an alias, Alexander Nomer, using the resources of one employer to escape the vengeance of the other.
He used the police to escape the revolutionaries he worked for, who had just discovered he worked for the police. It's the perfect, convoluted ending to his operational career, isn't it? Where did he go after his escape? Did he just disappear?
Not quite disappear. He settled in Berlin, taking his mistress, Irene, the German opera singer, with him. According to the sources, after years of high-stakes espionage and terror, he lived quietly until the war. Just settled down.
Living comfortably in Berlin with all his accumulated wealth, I assume. You mentioned he embezzled revolutionary funds and invested them. How successful was he in managing all this money he'd gathered?
Quite successful, it seems. Sources state he's defraudua revolucji fundis. He embezzled revolutionary funds and invested them, reportedly, quite shrewdly on the London stock market. He apparently multiplied his capital significantly and even founded his own trading company.
A respectable businessman.
Well, to maintain appearances and perhaps add to his income, he also worked, somewhat bizarrely, as a corset salesman and a stock speculator on the side.
A corset salesman and stock speculator in Berlin after leading the most dangerous terrorist organization in Russia. The mundane contrast is just striking. What were the consequences for the other people involved in his exposure? You mentioned Lopukin.
Yes, there were significant repercussions for those whose lives intersected with his betrayal. His wife, Yuba Mencken, who had remained completely unaware of his double life and believed him to be this dedicated revolutionary, was absolutely devastated by the revelation. She divorced him and emigrated to the United States, trying to escape the shadow.
Understandable. And Lopukin, the man who revealed him.
Lapukin, the former police director who bravely confirmed Azef's identity to Burtsev, paid a very heavy price for revealing state secrets, even secrets about a traitor. The Tsarist government exiled him to Siberia.
So the man who exposed the truth suffered terribly, while Azef enjoyed relative freedom and comfort in Germany, at least until World War I broke out.
Exactly. His quiet life in Berlin lasted until the outbreak of the war in 1914. From 1915 to 1917, as a Russian national living in Germany, he was interned by the German police as an enemy alien.
Caught by the war.
Yeah. The sources note he was umieszczany jako terrorysta, potężny zagrożenie Niemcom, czyli jako speak Rosyjski, basically. Placed under suspicion as a potential terrorist threat to Germany, or possibly just as a Russian spy. So the Germans seemed aware of his complex, dangerous past, or at least his potential for being involved in clandestine activities related to Russia.
Imprisoned again, but this time not for his actions as a revolutionary leader or a police spy, but simply for being a Russian citizen during wartime. The irony continues.
It does. And while he was interned, his health began to fail seriously. He developed kidney disease. Yevno Azef died of renal failure in Berlin on April 24, 1918, at the age of 48 or 49.
A surprisingly ordinary medical end for a life lived so extraordinarily, so dangerously.
Perhaps. And maybe fittingly for a man who existed entirely in the shadows, he was buried in an unmarked grave, number 446, in Friedhof-Wilmersdorf in Berlin. The sources note that his grave was lost, probably destroyed or paved over after World War II. The grave disappeared, and to this day, no one can indicate the place where his body is buried.
Wow, no trace left.
No trace. And the source concludes this part with a really powerful statement. At the end of this episode, I don't need to explain why I believe he was a double-triple agent, meaning one who served himself and only himself, always and exclusively himself.
Served himself and only himself. That phrase just resonates so strongly throughout his entire story, doesn't it? Overriding any perceived loyalty to either the revolutionary cause or the Tsarist state, it seems to be the dominant interpretation offered by the sources.
It really is a powerful recurring theme. And the exposure of Azef, you have to understand, had a truly devastating impact on the revolutionary movement at the time. The trust they had placed in him was just profound. One source quotes a revolutionary reflecting on the shock. Faith in Azef was so great that they wouldn't have believed his betrayal even with his own documents before their eyes. They would have assumed the writing was forged.
He'd cultivated such a convincing image of dedication and heroism over so many years. His unmasking must have felt like the ultimate violation of trust, a fundamental betrayal.
It was deeply, deeply demoralizing. For many revolutionaries, his betrayal fundamentally changed their view of their comrades, their methods, and the very nature of the revolutionary struggle itself. The quote about it is haunting. Roughly translating to, our very attitude towards life changed. Life itself looked at us with a fixed green snake's eye. This sense of a cold, calculating deceit right at the very heart of their movement was profoundly unsettling, world-shattering for some.
A fixed green snake's eye. That image speaks volumes about the shock and the revulsion they must have felt. How was Azef interpreted by those who tried to understand him, either at the time or later? Was he just seen as a simple villain, a monster?
Well, the interpretations vary, but they consistently highlight the extreme nature of his actions. Was he a monster? A psychopath? Purely driven by greed? Some saw him as incredibly cunning, a master manipulator who used all their complexes and all their behavior frameworks and behavior principles. Oh, he used it very artfully. He knew how to play people.
Right.
Others viewed his transformation as almost subhuman, a kind of metamorphosis, old juicadoios, from a man to a boa constrictor. Something cold and unfeeling that just squeezed the life out of those around him for his own benefit. But the dominant interpretation, as we've discussed, is that he served only himself, using both sides purely for his own gain.
He exploited the ideals of revolutionaries and the fear and ambition of the police, all for his personal benefit. And his exposure also revealed significant issues within the Ukraina itself, didn't it? It wasn't just about Azef's betrayal.
It absolutely did. Azef's unmasking exposed deep flaws and serious internal conflicts within the Ukraina apparatus. It showed how plot handlers could prioritize their own careers, their departmental rivalries, or personal animosities like that Lopukhin-Rachkovsky feud over the effective counteraction of revolutionary groups.
Right.
It also demonstrated how easily a truly cunning agent like Azef could manipulate or outmaneuver his own handlers, exploiting weaknesses in communication and the command structure. It really suggested a certain level of incompetence, or perhaps even willful blindness, within the secret police. They seemed more focused sometimes on managing their agents and playing internal politics than truly understanding the complex, dangerous game being played right under their noses.
They were so caught up in their own internal power struggles and bureaucracy that their star agent was basically running his own show, playing them almost as effectively as he played the revolutionaries. And all of this unfolded against that incredibly turbulent backdrop of early 20th century Russia.
Precisely. Azef didn't operate in a vacuum. His career spanned a period of massive social and political ferment, the lead-up to and aftermath of the 1905 revolution, widespread strikes, peasant unrest, brutal government repression. This included those horrific police-backed pogroms, which we heard about from the whistleblower Mestiev, occurring in cities across the empire. Azef existed within this environment of extreme violence and political instability, and he masterfully used the chaos and the desperate actions of both revolutionaries and the police for his own personal gain.
And figures like Vladimir Burtsev were so essential in trying to bring some light and accountability into this incredibly shadowy world.
Yes, Burtsev dedicated his life to uncovering provocateurs like Azef, seeing them as a fundamental enemy of any genuine political movement, revolutionary or otherwise. His persistence, his willingness to believe the almost unbelievable possibility of high-level betrayal, and his cleverness in securing that crucial confirmation from Lopukhin were ultimately what brought Azef's extraordinary double life crashing down.
So, what does this incredible, deeply disturbing story tell us today, over a century later? What's the ultimate takeaway from the life of Yevno Azef for us now?
Well, the sources leave us with a provocative, perhaps unsettling thought. One expert hints that the core methods, and maybe even more significantly, the underlying psychologies of clandestine work may not have changed all that much over the last 100 years or so. The work of the services and their internal workings haven't changed much over these little over 100 years.
That is a sobering thought. The potential for personal gain, the manipulation of ideals, the blurred lines between loyalty and pure self-interest. That feels timeless in a way.
Exactly. Azef's story forces us to confront the idea that in the shadowy world of espionage, revolution, maybe even high-stakes politics or business, the clear lines we like to draw between dedicated agent, ideological believer, and pure mercenary driven by self-interest are often much, much fuzzier in reality. He navigated these deadly worlds for years, manipulating everyone he encountered, seemingly loyal to none but himself, always and exclusively himself.
Was he a revolutionary who occasionally informed, or a police spy who occasionally allowed terror? Based on the sources, the latter seems closer to the truth, but perhaps he was, as that one source suggested, really a double-triple agent, loyal only to his own survival and his bank account.
His life serves as a stark, unsettling reminder of the human capacity for elaborate, long-term deception and the profound challenges of understanding true motivations in environments where trust is often just a weapon and betrayal is a form of currency.
It certainly leaves you pondering the true price paid, not just by the victims of terror or the victims of his betrayal, but by those who try to navigate a world built entirely on secrets. And how well we can ever truly know another person, especially when they choose to live completely in the shadows like Yevno Azef.
A lot to think about, indeed. A truly unique and disturbing case.
Absolutely. A story that definitely sticks with you.